When I started farming, I was looking at human wellness and human performance and going, what sort of things need to make a human being well? What about our food? What about our chickens? What about our pigs? How are they being raised? How are they, what are they eating in these big systems? How are they using their bodies? And what are their innate requirements to express wellness in a full holistic term? You could argue that human beings were more well the further back in history we go because we were living according to our requirements, our genetic requirements. We were eating well, we were moving our bodies well, and the prime cause of death back then, I'm talking about 40,000 years ago, was trauma. These days, of course, what do we got? We've got cancer, diabetes, depression, osteoporosis. These are all what are being referred to now as diseases of civilization. And to quote the American Journal of Physiology, human beings are now expressing the symptoms of wild humans in captivity. We are expressing the symptoms of zoo animals in captivity.
One of the wonderful things about remaining in one place for a little while is getting to know all the inspirational people in our local community. Two of these people are Jeff Powell and Michelle McManus from Southampton Homestead. We met Jeff when we were both presenting at a local food festival, and since then we have built a strong relationship. We have visited his 120-acre working farm several times now to see his commercial pasture-raised chicken operations, holistic management practices, and fire mitigation strategies. It's a beautiful property situated in a valley amongst pine plantations, native forest, and 2 rivers. Jeff and Michelle are so passionate about what they do, with so much love, care and attention for all of their animals. So we were delighted when Jeff kindly agreed to sit down for an interview to share with you his passion for what he does and why he does it.
Thank you, Jeff, for having us here at Southampton Homestead.
Of course.
Jeff and Michelle, they run a bit of a special operation, so you came to our attention because you're sort of ambassadors of Regenerative Agriculture, which is sort of like a big deal at the moment, but also cruelty-free food, the way you raise livestock.
Yep.
and things like that. But also, since we've come to know you and you tricked us into taking on those 50 chickens, we're having a great time. So we're raising our own food. We've taken inspiration from what you're doing, but we've since seen that you're trying to bring back small-scale food processing with your chicken abattoir. And I think that's got a really bad name with people just because of this. When it gets to large scale, there's just no way to do it with the animals' welfare in mind. And you're mentoring a lot of young producers as well in the area. The chicken tractors that you're using, they're really easily recognisable to anyone that's sort of read Joel Salatin's. Yep. You went and met the man? You went over there?
Yeah, fortunately I was there in 2012. I did a regen farm tour of the United States with a bunch of Aussie producers.
Amazing.
Basically jumped on a bus and saw some incredible work. And it was back before Regen had even had those hits, we were right down the bottom of the Google curve, so to speak. So people didn't really understand what Regen was.
For people that haven't come across regenerative agriculture, just in a nutshell.
And I know we hear the word holistic a lot, but it is actually all levels, all systems. So when you talk about regeneration, you're talking about regenerating the human beings. You're talking about regenerating social webs, economic webs, ecosystem webs, but literally taking things from an energy level here to here. So that's regeneration. So in recent history, our food and agriculture systems were actually at a higher energy level than they are now. So they're in a degraded state. Whether you look at the soil, whether you look at the rural communities, whether you look at debt, whether you look at stress, health indicators, high suicide rate farmers, that is a degraded state. So regenerate means we need to get back to somewhere where we were. Is this cow, is this chicken, is this pig expressing its natural behaviours to be mentally well, emotionally well? Is it using its body in a way, scratching for bugs and is got an enriched mental life and a rich physical life, and are they eating food that's actually congruent with their requirements as well? So feeding grain to cows, is not congruent.
Right.
Right? So it makes them sick.
This is what Joel Salatin's like when he says the pigness of the pig. He's expressing all those ideas.
The chickeness. Yep. He's talking about and I've had this conversation with Joel too. So I went there in 2012, first walked into the field, saw the absolute density of life on that farm. And, it's not a large farm. It's maybe 800 acres and half is forest.
Okay, yeah, righto.
And so between that and a couple of leased properties, they feed 5,000 families. That's just...
That many? I didn't know that.
Yeah, extraordinary. Sitting at the time with the question in my mind, small farm here at Southampton, looking at, I'm never going to be able to run beef or, in a way that sustains an economy. Because of the numbers, right? So, but I can run 3,000 head of chickens because they're this big, and I can do that with a planned grazing methodology, etc. And then the other piece of the puzzle for the Salatins was, of course, the harvesting part. So I think 2006 there was a doco called Food Inc. In Food Inc, Joel Salatin's farm was showcased, and there they were on a veranda harvesting chickens, and I just went, and these were for sale. Of course, North America has different regulations around that, for example. But I thought, I wonder if we could do that here. And when I looked historically at it, the interesting part was that in 1992, there was 54 small family-run abattoirs across the southwest of Western Australia. By 2004, they're all gone.
Right. We've even heard that where we're, the small town that we're at, people were, it was just so great.
Yeah.
You had a pig or whatever you raised, and you could take that just as a single piece, not a great big herd, and they'd do it for you. And
in my mind, that's a red flag. That's not actually a good thing because it's the centralisation, and of course all those people who could no longer access the market. Because they've got nowhere to harvest their chickens. There's got no opportunity even though they wanted to be a poultry farmer. And so that was the quandary Michelle and I faced was, and then Michelle and I went to the Satlatins again in 2014 with Darren Doherty and Lisa from Regenerative. We were able to spend some time in the abattoir with Daniel Salatin and his team. We took in as much as we could, came here, picked up our first babies and had a go.
Yeah.
And it's been, of course, a massive learning curve ever since then. But so from the start of a very small little facility, you're talking about only a few square metres of an approved facility by the health department. The other interesting element to that, and people may encounter this as well with the local regulations with their municipalities, is not only have we lost the expertise on how to shuck a chicken by hand, we've lost the expertise on how to regulate a facility that you can do that in. So the regulators were gone who could regulate a small, and so we had to use the term micro-abattoir.
Okay.
And that of course means an abattoir that we might process about 10,000 birds a year versus, for example, at the main plant in Perth there, 12,000 birds an hour.
An hour?
An hour.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah. So, and of course that's fully mechanised, fully automated, and but we wanted a smaller facility to got our hand in. Of course now, we've adapted that knowledge. Still same workflows, but we've got a bigger, more ergonomic space, better benches. So we can harvest 500 chickens in a day.
To get to that number, because all of your workforce.
Yeah.
Is local producers that have you're sort of they share your passion for this. Did it take long to get up to that number? Because you communicate so well with them, and Pasky and I got to have a day here because part of your thing is radical transparency, right? Yeah. Anyone that eats your chicken, they can come down and check it out, and you won't find that in big producers. They're just like, no, you're not coming in.
No, well that's a big problem at the moment for us as well, Troy, is that we're trying to grow the market, right? We want more people to eat chicken like this, and so we've now got a small hub of really good producers who want to increase their numbers, and also we want to increase the number of farmers. So we've got sort of 2 other farmers have approached us as well to say, hey, we would like to grow some chicken.
And this is to use your micro-abattoir.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And which is great, but we haven't actually got the customers for that. And the cited reason is price. If you can't get an answer on how that chicken was grown, who grew it, what did they feed it, which you won't get with the industrial system, then there is a reason to be concerned about that. If you want something different, if you want to know where your food came from, if you want it from people who are good stewards, who are using, literally the animals that are involved in our system leave this farm a better place. They serve two purposes. They improve our landscape and our ecosystem function, our soil carbon. They do all that work and then they become food. If your food's not doing that, it's almost like a lost opportunity, a lost purpose for how farming used to be run.
People that are producing food with a commitment to improving the land and knowing that they're going to hand it on, and they care when it gets to the next generation, that's really important, because that's missing. It's just lease this, take as much fertility out as you can, get the product. So I guess you can get cheap chicken, but you're not paying the true price.
No, you're not paying the environmental price,
right.
and you're certainly not encouraging the form of agriculture that we're trying to, we need to do things differently. We really, really do. We do run ruminants here as well. So we've got a herd of cows and we've got 2 horses that are used to do the knockdown.
Yep.
And then we bring the chickens through. And then we've got long recovery periods for the pasture. So we really do, like the calculation, we can support 19 ruminants here. We know that. Through experience, so that's what we do with those animals. But we don't grow them for economy. We grow them for biology. Part of our goal here is to also provide access. So for these producers to be able to access birds and to be able to farm and have those experiences and enjoy the economy that brings, but also then access the market, the retail market, by having birds that have been processed, in an approved facility. So that brings diversity into communities. It brings accessibility of food to other communities. When you talk about food deserts, where you can't necessarily access those nutrient-dense, pasture-raised meats. There was a recession back in the 1960s, and this was a farming, a dairy beef operation for over a century.
Okay.
And in that recession, the government bailed out a whole bunch of families who were in financial difficulty. So they bought their farms, families left, and then they planted pines into all the fields. We were lucky in one sense that these pastures were under pines for 40 years. They bypassed the chemical revolution, so to speak.
Right.
So they never had the sprays and the treatments on them. When I came in 2006, the pines had just been cut down. It was just trashed. It was moonscape. And right down onto the riparian zones, which had kind of been inaccessible for quite a while. The blackberry, literally canes, fatter than your thumb and 10 foot high.
Yeah, right.
And all the way to the riverbank. I would use pine logs. We'd drop them, karate chop the blackberry, and then let the goats in. They just eat all the foliage off, which then exposes, you can actually see the landscape and see what you're dealing with. And then put the pigs in there and once again lock them into small areas.
With electric fencing?
Yep.
Yep.
And they would, of course, root out all the root balls and just have an absolute, ball. And then, of course, you can physically remove all the blackberry, and then we would sprinkle handfuls of perennial seed. The survey we did last year, we got 54 varieties of plants growing out there in the pasture.
And that's since the chicken, you're just moving those chickens, and that's it. You're just cows
and chickens.
Nutrients, chickens.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep. And recovery, right. So the chickens are only ever on one spot for one day.
Of 1 year.
Of 1 year. And so that's our budget, if you like. A Salatin chicken tractor, 3.5 metres by square, that's the amount of manure that we need on that, 10 square metres per year.
Okay.
And that's perfect. Any more, and then the chickens, as you know, scratch and they'll damage the stalks and the root balls of the perennial systems. So even from a remedial sense, we move the tractors every day. We're out there with the dollies every single day of the year, moving the tractors. And then if there's been any bare soil, so the chickens have hammered a particular spot, we put remedial stuff straight onto it. So compost, hay. We do get a germination as well of the chicken food. So we feed, of course,
it's all good.
We feed the birds a mixture of legumes and grains, and they're fermented. So they've A, had the biological treatment, or B, had the chicken treatment. That's all part of that, but diversity, an annual perennial cultural mix. We use things like seaweed concentrate as well. When that's put into the grain to ferment overnight, that'll then get incorporated by the bacteria and be available to the chickens, who will then poo it out onto the paddock, which will then be incorporated into the soil, which will then be incorporated into the grasses, which is eaten by the cattle. So there's ways of nutrient and mineral cycling. With these perennial cultures, because they're such deep-rooted, like the tussocks go down for over a metre. They're mining. They've got their mycelial network beyond them, bringing in the minerals that they need from an enormous range. And even to the point where we've got blackberry growing in the fields as well. It's summer active perennial.
Yep.
So anything that's got solar panels out in the Australian summer is pumping sugars to the underground biology. Now you've got to really manage it, right? So it is invasive, but we do that. This time of year, we're doing some slashing. So we're taking everything back down, laying it flat on the ground. We've had the first rains just through now.
How beautiful
the
is it?
The smell is fantastic. Oh, it was intoxicating this morning. Yeah, you can literally smell the sweet sugars, as everything's waking up.
So the process of growing out your chickens, you don't have a hatchery here. You're not taking the eggs, but you basically get the chicks from a few days old all the way through to harvest?
From a day old.
Okay.
Yep, there's a local corporate hatchery that we are very fortunate to have a relationship with, and they supply us with the chicks that we need. We run 10 batches a year, and we have those deliveries come once every 4 weeks, and it's related to the life cycle of the chickens. So the first thing that happens is you're brooding your chicks. So where they need a high level of support because they don't have their mums, we get batches of about 600 birds. They'll grow out at 3 weeks of age. They're ready for their pasture environment.
Yep. Okay.
So they'll graduate out of the brooder into the grassland. And so then we're running the Salatin tractors. They then spend pretty much the next 7 weeks in their tractors. They have a family group, of course. So it's it's typically 40 for us. It's 40 to 50 birds. That group, they all know each other. There's a pecking order.
It's established right from the
right
get-go.
at the start, and that's all they have to deal with. They grow together, and then they're harvested.
Yep.
So they're never exposed to the hundreds of thousands of that are in the large sheds as well, which is a very confusing environment. And let alone, of course, in the pasture system, the tractors don't have any bottoms, so they're literally moved onto as Joel Salatin says, a fresh salad bar every day. And you can see the birds; they're just so excited to move every day. Poor old lizards, the poor old frogs, the poor old whatever's in there, mice. There's mice, of course, living around the chicken tractors too. Chickens are not vegetarians. Give the big tip; they're omnivores, just like us. So 10 weeks of age in total. So 3 weeks in the brooder, 7 weeks outside in the environment. And then they're ready to go so they're not sexually mature. That's the other thing. They don't lay eggs, or they're not crowing or anything like that. They're still
noticed that with ours.
So the Ross birds, which are a white leghorn crossed with a white Plymouth, and then selected for certain characteristics. I've heard it said that this system is kind of like running a Ferrari off-road, So in that they've been, these chickens have kind of been selected for certain things. But I argue that point. You've got a genotype and you've got a phenotype.
Yep.
So the genetics are probably the same as every other Ross chicken in Australia, but the phenotype that they express from day one, because they're being either fed different foods or they're having this life that they eat, move, think, differently to their siblings in the sheds. They express a completely different phenotype. The body shape's different, the fat's different, the bone density's different, the gut development. They've been exposed to a biome for a start, a healthy ecosystem. So they're eating soil, they're eating bugs.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And then harvest day, right? Normally you've got a restriction of feed the day before. You want to give them enough so they're not panicking, but not as much as you would give them normally, right?
Keep the water up, restrict the food.
Yeah. And completely remove the food by about 5 o'clock the previous day or 3 o'clock the previous day. And so that allows the crop and the digestive system to empty out.
Yep.
And so that just is one less thing to worry about when you're harvesting. And so for us, we go out in the morning because they're in the tractors. It's easy for us just to bring them to the front of the tractor, and then we can choose the birds which are in the condition that we want for harvest that day, the right weight range, etc. And then onto the trailer, we put them into the crates, the transport crates, onto the trailer, and then they're driven 70 metres to the micro-abattoir.
Do you find they tend to stay fairly quiet, when they're in the crates? Because it's not a change of scene. The sounds are still the same, the smells and...
Yeah, they've been in the crates before, remember, too. So when they're graduated, they're popped in the crates.
Nothing bad happened then, though.
Wow, in fact, it was a great adventure, right? The interesting thing for us in the harvest rooms, in the food hub down there, you'll notice that the birds, even though they're waiting their turn for slaughter, they're relaxed. They're not stressed. And we use tools like we have a stunning machine so that to provide an electric shock, and it knocks them out instantly so that they're unconscious. That then means that the chicken is up to the point where they were picked up, they're completely unaware of the rest of the process. So that's the beginning of their journey into food, becoming food. And then into the kill cone, a single puncture wound to the 4 major blood vessels. So nothing dramatic, no cutting of the throats or removing of the heads or anything like that. In fact, you want the autonomic system to remain intact, and that's the heart, lungs, so that the blood is so the bird is inverted. All of the blood comes out of the body, and therefore you don't get the blood pooling at the joints and clotting. From being a chicken in the crate to being you're ready for scalding is about 120 seconds. So I'm not advocating that our system replace that because we're not efficient, like if you look at a system like that, but it's eminently more effective. And I'm talking about from a hygiene perspective,
right,
from a level of attention of detail to that food. You've got so many human eyes and hands touching those animals to assess the condition, the different steps to then as the birds are processed.
Yep.
So starting off with the actual the slaughter, and then the scalding, and then the plucking, and then there's 2 people involved there. Both of them handle each bird, but looking for things like an unknown wound or something that might be septic or
it's quality control at every step.
Absolutely, yeah, that can happen. And then of course inside you've got both the people who are removing the guts, the evisceration, and then you've got, of course, quality control where people are with a fine-tooth comb looking over the animal, making sure there's no feathers and checking for that the organs have all been removed and the chicken and presenting it for the customer, and that end of making the food of a standard, and then of course and then packing and chilling and whatever. So the other big piece of the puzzle for us as well has been the distribution, and we've got a few different models amongst our growers, because some people are retailing chicken themselves, and a few of us using third party. So where typically on a Wednesday, the wholesalers will come and we'll load them up, and then they'll take that produce back to Perth, and it means that from a farming perspective, we can then spend the rest of the week regenerating the landscape,
farming,
doing animal husbandry, doing all the things that and not necessarily, not that we didn't enjoy interacting with the many people who became friends as our customers at the farmers market, etc. But just taking the time away from a farm it's not constructive. It doesn't help us do a better job.
The early challenge that you faced was marketing, and that's when you had to drive hundreds of kilometres, round trip every weekend, right? To try and well, you were trying to build the market from scratch, sort of thing.
If you're going to a farmer's market and you're meeting a farmer, just know that the wear and tear on their body to sit in a car and to get up at whatever hour, it's kind of not safe. Because you can be fatigued from farming all week, and then you're going to a Saturday farmers market just to hand the chicken to somebody. That's a real privilege if you get the opportunity to do that. But somebody who's not homesteading, so somebody who wants to generate an economy, and I'm talking about a home economy. So I want to have an income from a piece of land. What is that produce, and who are your customers, and where are they, and how are you going to get the produce to those customers are really important questions before you start ever farming.
Had you had them all answered before you
started? So this is, if I had my time again, that's kind of the irony about it, right? The challenge is, when people who are asked, why don't you buy chicken, they'll cite price, and that it's not competitive with quote unquote free range chicken. But of course, put my Morpheus hat on again and say the red pill, did you know where that free range chicken came from? It's maybe not the chicken you think it is. When you eat a Southampton chicken, or you eat a chicken from one of the pasture growers around us, from Galloway, from Roses, from the other farms, that chicken is made up of the water that came from that valley. It's made up of the care and attention of the people who raised that chicken. it's foraged on the soil and the soil biome and the greens that grew around in those fields, you know. So it's a level of connection that's a deep, profound quantum level of connection that you get to have with a place and with other human beings who grew that food for you.
And it is, you can't separate your life from the animal's life when they're in your care. We've raised some pigs now and we've slaughtered them for our own consumption, and people are like, oh, how can you? And it's like, well, why would you think just because you're raising an animal to eat that you don't care about it?
Yeah.
You know, that mental break, I guess, people are just like, how can you be nice to something but then still eat it? It's like, well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, I'll use the word love, right?
Right.
Have a deep, deep love and affection for, you know, like Joel Salatin says, I'm citing him a bit, the pigness of the pigs. I mean, the character of those animals, and to love and enjoy their life, and then love and enjoy them after their life.
Yep.
You know, because not only have those animals done amazing work on the farm and contributed to the farm's wellness and health and well-being, they then go on to contribute to our health and well-being by becoming nutrient-dense food for us as well. Yep. So they have a great life, and then after their life, we have a great life.
How do I look?
Ridiculous. Doesn't cover your eyebrows. So.
Well, that's one of the hairiest parts on me.
I know.
So there we go, we're all scrubbed, we're ready to go in. Jeff's dressed us up, I've got to cover my beard. Very wise too, you never know what's living in there these days. We'll go and have a bit of a look inside. Make sure no one crashes into me.